Hey there guys, welcome back to my channel. Now I know I haven't posted on this channel for absolutely ages, but that is all about to change, so make sure you are subscribed. Alright then, well in today's video I wanted to chat about my first ever novel that I have written called The Blackmore Nightmares. Now, I want to share with you guys my journey in writing this book, where the idea came from, and answering some questions that a lot of people have asked me over the last couple of weeks. I mean, don't worry, I am not going to reveal any spoilers from the book if you haven't read it already, so do not panic. So here is a very quick non-spoiler summary of what the book is about. So, The Blackmore Nightmares is a horror novel. I mean, anyone who knows me knows that I absolutely love horror. I actually run a horror YouTube channel on here. It is my main go-to, and I think the reason why I love horror so much is because horror explores everyday fears in a way that few other genres can do, not just in books but also in movies. I mean, it gives us a chance to explore the unknown, the paranormal, part of, the human nature that, is often hidden away in the shadows. And I mean, horror can really awaken certain emotions and adrenaline that, other genres of books and movies cannot do. In The Blackmore Nightmares, we follow the Collins family who move into a big old house to have a fresh start after they have had some awful family tragedy. Now, this house has history. Some serious history. Not only has something already really bad happened at this house many years ago, but the house itself was built on land that it really shouldn't have been built on. Now, the whole family, they all start having horrific nightmares that get worse and worse as the story goes on. And these nightmares that, this poor family keep having, it's making something else behind it all stronger. Things get pretty crazy in this book. I mean, there are twists, there are turns all throughout. There'll be moments that will shock you, moments that may or may not gross you out, and moments that will make you feel very emotional. And I kind of feel a lot of people will be able to relate to certain parts of this book. And just when you think you've got to the scariest parts of the book, something else happens that will just blow your mind. When I was writing this story, I gave myself nightmares, which is just insane. Not only that, but I kind of used my husband, Peter, as a little bit of a guinea pig. And every now and again, I would read him out a random chapter just to get first-hand reaction. And there is one particular chapter that I read out to him this one time, and this whole chapter is centered around a certain character having a nightmare. The whole chapter is just the nightmare. And when I finished reading this chapter to Peter, his reaction was, "You have got one effed up imagination," which is exactly the reaction that I wanted. However, there is more, because when we went to bed that night, we woke up the next morning and Peter told me he had full-on nightmares, and the nightmares that he had were similar to the things that happened in the chapter that I read out to him the night before. As you can imagine, I was over the flipping moon. This is what I want, and at the end of the day, I'm not writing romance or comedy, I am writing full-blown dark horror, and this is just everything that I wanted and more. So, where did the idea of The Blackmore Nightmares come from? Well, that is actually a very interesting question, and it comes with a very interesting story. So it's an idea that I randomly came up with when I was in high school, and I was around 14 years old. Bear in mind, I'm currently about to turn 39. So even at a young age, I was always into horror, and I always kind of imagined myself to one day work on a movie, maybe become a film director, maybe create my own movie that would be one of the scariest movies of all time. I was born in the 80s and grew up in the 90s, so I love all of the old horrors like A Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Candyman, Carrie, Poltergeist. I just love them all because I grew up watching them as a young kid. So I always wanted to create a movie, and this is where the Blackmore Nightmares idea came from when I was in high school. And I was always a bit of a daydreamer, so I would like daydream for ages and sort of play things out as a movie in my head. I think some of you can relate to that. Then I went on to college and I did media studies, which, you know, I absolutely loved. I did very well in media studies, but then after that, I never really got into movies, or never became a film director or anything like that. I mean, life just gets in the way, as they say. And at the end of the day, when you leave school or when you leave college or even when you leave university, you've got to make money. You've got to earn a living. You've got to build a life for yourself as you turn into an adult. So life doesn't always pan out the way you imagine it when you're a youngster. But over the years, this idea, the Blackmore Nightmares, was always in my mind. I mean, for years, I would just randomly start daydreaming about this mental story that I have created in my mind, playing out in my head like a movie. I always knew how it was going to start, and I always knew how it was going to end. It was just piecing together, getting it from one to the other. Anyway, fast forward to 2024, so a lot of years later, and I was speaking to Peter and also our good friend Karen about my story, and they both said that I need to write it down. Write a book. It doesn't need to be perfect to begin with, just make that initial first step. Anyway, months went by and I kept thinking about it, and then we get into 2025 just last year, and my New Year's resolution for 2025 was going to be to start writing the Blackmore Nightmares. I believe it was actually February of last year when I opened my Microsoft Word document and just began typing. Fast forward to just over a year later, so the end of February, early March this year, my book is finished. I then spent a lot of time proofreading, going through absolutely everything, cutting bits out, adding bits in, and eventually, after a lot of long, late nights, the book was ready. And the Blackmore Nightmares is now available to buy on Amazon worldwide. And I tell you what, guys, I was so scared publishing this book. I was really out of my comfort zone. I've never done anything like this. This was all new to me. I've never written a book before, let alone published it for the world to see. But I did it, and it's definitely up there as one of my most proudest achievements of my life. A story that has been over 30 years in the making. Okay, so let's answer some questions that I get asked quite a lot. Well, this is actually a really good question to start off with, and I didn't so much get writer's block. However, there was a moment, actually there was a few moments, but this one particular moment where I was more than halfway through the story writing, and I was about to enter sort of like third act territory. However, certain things had to happen for me to get there, and I wanted to make sure that I did it right. I never ever wanted to do anything horrifying in the book just for the sake of, say, shock value. Anything bad or scary that happens in this book serves a purpose, like, for example, it moves the story forward. And that was always a number one rule for me that I'd given to myself before I started writing. So yeah, there was a moment where I was kind of like going into the third act of the story where I had to take sort of time out and kind of do some more daydreaming and daydream some of the scenarios, and then ask myself questions of, well, if this happens to her because of him, what happens to this person? And I was kind of like daydreaming, almost like this isn't my book, I'm a reader, and these are the questions that the readers would have. So yeah, I was kind of like playing it all out, and yeah, I didn't really have writer's block, but I would, as I said, I would take time out whenever I was reaching important parts of the story, because I needed it to land right, and it just needed to be perfect. Now, this is a good question I've been asked many, many times, and I don't want to tell you what, chapter numbers that, these chapters are, but I do have two particular favourite chapters that involved me going in depth into someone's nightmare. Really sort of like having the room to go all out and just have some fun during these two particular nightmare moments that I just really relished in, because I was writing them, but as I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge, massive fan of A Nightmare on Elm Street, so I definitely had that in the back of my mind when I was writing a few of these nightmares, and yeah, I just had a blast. Oh, another great question. And I was actually reading a Stephen King novel at the time of me writing the Blackmore Nightmares, and it was Carrie, which I believe is one of his first horror novels that was published at the time. I could be completely wrong though. I'm sure it was one of his really early ones, and I wanted to read it and see how he wrote, and just to see if there was like sort of like any tips that could rub off onto myself. I also just wanted to do this book justice, and I kind of feel just go straight to the master of horror himself, Stephen King, and that is what I did. And also, I absolutely loved his book, Carrie. If you haven't read the book version, you really need to see it. It is bloody brilliant. But yeah, Stephen King, as I said, he is the master of horror. I've read a lot of his books over the years. And also, another great author I like is Edgar Allan Poe, who has written some brilliant, fantastic horror short stories that really stay with you. And one of his stories that stuck with me is the Telltale Heart. I mean, if you haven't read it, please go and read it immediately. Great question. I mean, I made a few mistakes when I was writing the book for the first time. I mean, I just went all out on Microsoft Word, completely forgetting that, you know, when you're writing on Microsoft Word, those pages are A4, and, you know, these books, they're not size A4, you know. I needed to sort of like format it into the correct size. I also needed to do like headers and footers where you've got your page numbers, which I should have just done from the start. But I think for me, you know, one of the hardest parts is you, the writer, you the author, you're the biggest critic for yourself. Nobody else is seeing this story until it's published, and I wanted this book to be absolutely perfect. So I spent hours beyond hours and like real late nights going through a lot of the proofreading process. So for me, it was after the story had ended that I found the most difficult, and then, you know, it was just time for proofreading. It was very time consuming, but at the end of the day, you want your book to be perfect before it goes out to the world. Well, I used to write like a chapter or two really late in the night. Usually from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. was my window for writing. I would be writing that sort of time because it's nice and quiet, the world is sleeping, we've got 2 dogs, a load of cats who are all sleeping that time of night, and also because it's dark. I've got the mood lamp on and I'm in that horror zone. However, there is a moment in the book where I literally did freak myself out. I don't want to tell you which part of the story it is and spoil anything for anyone, but I got so freaked out that I ended up thinking that I had a spirit or a ghost in the room in the office with me while I was writing this part of the story. Do you know what made it even scarier is when I left my office that night and just walked over to the bedroom to join my husband and go to sleep, I noticed on the wall, just outside the office door, a Canva photo on the wall had turned sideways. And I've actually got a photo of this. I took a photo of it that night, so I'm just going to stick it up here for you guys to see. Yeah, that was a very creepy evening. It felt like that I had somehow summoned something into the room while I was writing this part of the book, so yeah, that was a bit of a creep show. Well, as I've mentioned with some of the nightmare moments, I had A Nightmare on Elm Street in the back of my mind that gave me a lot of inspiration, but there's also like, there is this particular dramatic chasing scene in the book. Won't spoil it for you, but there is a big chase scene, and I took inspiration from Halloween for the chase scene. You know the moment where Laurie Strode is being chased across the streets by Michael Myers and how edge of your seat moment that is? Well, that is where I got the idea from. Also, there was also a moment that happens in the book where I had been watching a certain Stephen King movie, I'm not going to tell you which Stephen King movie it is, because it might actually give something away in this story. So I'm going to keep that one quiet. But yeah, something from a Stephen King film gave me inspiration for a certain thing that happens in this book. And also, the original Ghostbusters from the 80s, there's actually a scene in Ghostbusters. It's actually really scary, you know? Even like watching it back as an adult, it's quite a creepy scene. And it gave me the idea for something else that happened in the Blackmore Nightmares. And it's actually a scary moment because, you know, it's during a nightmare. So yeah, there's actually like quite a few sprinkles of like a few different awesome, you know, horror movies from the 80s, 90s, maybe something from the 70s, who knows. And, you know, maybe from different books as well that I've read has given me some incredible ideas to scatter around to create this book. The best advice that I can give is just start writing. Just start writing. It doesn't need to be perfect to start off with. Just begin it, and then you will get the writing bug, believe me, because there will be moments where you just won't be able to just stop writing. You sort of like get into this zone and you just go full force. Honestly, just start writing, get it all down, and when you get to the end, that is when, you know, the proofreading commences. And honestly, that sense of achievement you feel when you finish your book, especially your first ever book, is off the scale. The biggest free high in life ever. Oh, absolutely, and I'm going to continue writing horror because I just absolutely love horror. I think the interesting thing now, though, is the Blackmore Nightmares is an idea that has been 30 years in the making. That is many years of daydreaming how the story was going to pan out. Now, I'm going to be writing a brand new horror novel, but from, like, ideas that I'm just dreaming up right now. These aren't from 30 years ago, and I haven't had 30 years to sort of, like, fester up ideas, you know? And boy, do I have many stories floating around in my head for my next story. I have actually been doing a lot of brainstorming recently for my next book, and I'm hoping to start writing it in the coming weeks. Right then, so that is all the questions answered. Well, before I wrap this video up, I'm actually going to read the summary on the back of the book, just to give you another little spoiler-free insider of what this story is about. Some houses are built on secrets. Blackmore House was built on something far worse. Blackmore House was supposed to be a fresh start. For Ava Collins and her family, it was meant to be a place to heal, a quiet home far from the past and the grief they carry with them. But the house is not empty. Something beneath the land remembers. Whispers creep through the walls at night. Doors lock themselves. Dreams become shed nightmares. And the deeper Ava searches for answers, the more she begins to realize that the house is standing on ground that was never meant to be disturbed. Decades ago, a man named Ernest Craven believed suffering could be bound to the earth itself. He believed the land could remember pain. He believed death would not stop him. Now, the truth buried beneath Blackmore House is waking up, and it is hungry. As the past tears its way into the present, Ava and her family must face a terrifying reality. It will never stop coming. Honestly, guys, if you love dark horror with twists and turns at every corner, then you will 100% love this book. I'm gonna leave a link in the description box below if you would like to purchase a copy of the Blackmore Nightmares. All I ask for is that if you do buy a copy, please leave a review on Amazon after you finish the book. Alright then, guys, well, that is a wrap. Thank you all for joining me today and listening to my story. Make sure you do smash that subscribe button, stay safe out there, and I'll see you all again very soon.